Hi, it's Mary. I hope that you are doing well today. We are going to talk about two kinds of paperwork that you will find very useful if you are able to find it for your relatives. So we're talking about immigration paperwork and naturalization paperwork. The main immigration paperwork that you'll find will be ship manifests for the ships that your ancestors came over on. The naturalization paperwork that you will find falls into a few categories. You will find declarations of intention, and then you'll find petitions to become citizens. So basically, we're just going to go over these things today and look at examples of them. So before our ancestors arrived in our country, they bought a ticket in the country they were sailing from, and on that ticket was their information, which would be put onto the ship's manifest or the passenger list from the country they were sailing in. When they arrived in the United States, at the port of arrival, they would also make up a passenger list for their records. So if you are really lucky, you can find two passenger lists for the same trip. One that was created at the port of departure and one that was created at the port of arrival. So I'm going to pause for a minute and set this up so you can look at some of these with me. So ships manifests started out as very simple pieces of paperwork. So they'd be one sheet. It would just be a list of the people who were on the ship. So your group of people, like if you were traveling as a family, you would have the first person's name in your group on that list, and then the other people in your group would be on there, and it would say how you were related to that first person. For that person, it would say what the job was, so it would list their job. For the following people, it would say how they were related to that person, and it would give ages. As time went on, more information was added to those. So by the early 1900s, it had things like, in addition to your name, your age, and occupation, it would also say what city you were going to, and if you were going to meet somebody there, who it would be. Starting in the 19-teens, it would include other information. So it had your name, your age, your occupation, how you're related to that first person in your group. It would have your nationality, where you were born, the city and the country, where your last place of residence was, who you were living with in that place, and where it would have where you're going to and who you're meeting there. So we're going to look at, I don't have any of them from a long time ago with just the lists, and I believe all the ones I have are 2-page forms. We'll take a look at some of those, and then we'll go on to the naturalization paperwork. So this first one is for a ship that sailed from Bremen in May of 1911. And the ship's name is here. It's the Kronprinzessin Cecily. So this is one of the 2-page forms. This is the first page, and this is the second page. And I don't think we're going to get all of that on the camera at one time, so we'll just go through what's on here. So it has the family name or your last name, the given name or your first name, your age, your occupation, if you're able to read or write, your nationality, the last permanent residence, so the country and the city or the town, who you lived with there, your final destination, which is going to have the state and the city or town. So this is the second page, and if you see here it says arriving at the port of New York. It has whether you have a ticket for your final destination, where that destination is, who you are going to meet there. Then there's some personal characteristics like your height and your hair color, your complexion, and then it has the place of birth. So it has the country of birth and the city or town. So I have actually found birth cities from the passenger lists, and I have also found names of relatives in the paperwork for the passenger, so on the passenger list also. Sometimes you'll see things like what we have going on here where there's a written note. And I looked at that written note and I had no idea what it was until I got to the end of the paperwork for that ship, and I found this. And this is the record of detained aliens. So if you arrived and you weren't feeling well, or they thought you didn't have enough money, or you were a youngster and nobody came to pick you up, you would be detained. And on this list of detained passengers, it has the mother and her 5 children. And the reason that they are detained is that the husband is in the hospital. He's actually written down lower. And then it says that, wife and children. And it says that he was released and was on his way to Portland, Oregon. So if you look at passenger lists, make sure you go to the end of that set of records and see if you can find any records of detained aliens. If I hadn't have gone back to this part, I would not have even realized that they had been detained. So other things you might find written in, and there aren't any on here, but sometimes you'll find a date written in here, and often those dates are the dates that their naturalization paperwork went through. So you can get an idea of when people became citizens, if they became citizens, by the dates that are listed on there. So this is another 2-page passenger list. And it is the SS Bayern sailing from Hamburg, arriving at the port of New York. And again, we can't get the whole thing in here, but the nice thing about this set of paperwork is that it's all typewritten. So it is very easy to read. You don't have to try to decipher what it says. And again, it's got the information of where they stayed before, who they were staying with there, where they're going, if they're meeting a relative, who they're meeting, and then they're over here, their place of birth. So the nice thing about the SS Bayern sailing in May of 1923 is that I also have the paperwork from the port of Hamburg. And so this paperwork is much more simple, but it also will have less information. So on this one, you've got 2 sheets still. This is one set of records. This is another set of records. So this one, and it's in German, so if you know any German or you took high school German, you'll be able to practice your German. So it's got the last name, the first name, male or female, their age, where they're from, and where they are going to. So this is a nice set of paperwork because you've got the Hamburg passenger list and you have the New York passenger list. So that's just the record of detained passengers again. And while we're looking at that, I just want to point out that you can find passenger lists at ellisisland.org, familysearch.org, ancestry.com, I believe also at MyHeritage, or one that people don't use a lot, but I have found really helpful for passenger lists and naturalization paperwork is the National Archives website. And some of the people who work there are really great and will go the extra mile to help you find things. So becoming a citizen has a few steps in the process as well, or it did in the past when most of this information is from. And the first paperwork that would be filed would be a declaration of intention. And you had to wait a certain amount of time after you moved to the United States before you could file a declaration of intention. And the declaration of intention will contain information about you, where you were born, your birth date, if you're married, your spouse's name, where you were married, things of that nature. And after you filed that, you had to wait a period of time, and then you would file the petition for naturalization. And you have some of the same information on the petition for naturalization. You have additional information and less information both. So we'll go over the information that's on both of those pieces of paperwork. There's also a certificate of arrival. So when you're going to file that declaration of intention, you got a certificate of arrival that was just a record of your name or the name you used when you came to the United States, your port of arrival, the name of your ship, and the date. And so we'll take a look at some of the declarations of intention. And I think we have one declaration of intention and a petition for naturalization. And again, I'll adjust the camera and then we'll take a look at those. So this is the certificate of arrival, and you would get it from the Department of Labor. It will have the immigrant's name when they arrived, the date they arrived, the name of the ship, and then the port of entry. And then it says on it the day that the certificate of arrival was issued. This is a declaration of intention, and this one is from the late 30s or early 40s. And the nice thing about those is they started including a photo. Some of the later ones did not include a photo. So the things that you'll find on here are the person's name, their address, their occupation, male or female, physical characteristics, their nationality, the city and country of their birth, their birth date, whether they're married or single, their spouse's name, their wedding date, where their spouse was born, where they came into the country, where the spouse came into the country. Sorry, that is where his spouse came into the country, the name of his children, and if he filed any previous declarations of intention. So this person had actually filed a declaration of intention once before. It'll list where their last foreign residence was and the port of entry. So the interesting thing I find on this one is that the port of entry for a certain period of time is usually New York, but there are other ports of entry. So New Orleans was a port of entry. If people are coming from Asia, then there are ports of entry in California. This person came in Baltimore, which I thought was really interesting, and I'm still intrigued as to why that was, and I don't really have any information on that. Oh, and the name of the ship and the date he arrived is on there also. Now, this one is a petition for naturalization for a different person. She filed hers in the early 30s. And again, the information on here is her name, where she lives, her birthday, what her job is, her nationality, spouse's name, when she was married, where she was married, where she entered the United States and when, on here, since her husband was already previously naturalized, his date of naturalization and where he was naturalized is on there. The children's names and where they were born and where they live. Where she was born, where she came in, the name of the ship. And then for the petition for naturalization, that is where you needed witnesses to vouch for you. So they would witness that you were not that they're acquainted with you, and on some of them it'll ask that'll say something like, to my knowledge, this person is not an anarchist, and other kinds of things like that. So the different time periods have different information that's requested. And that is what the petition for naturalization looks like. There's a period of time after that's filed before you're sworn in and you sign the oath of allegiance. So you can probably tell from that most of my relatives and ancestors entered the country, the United States, within a very narrow amount of time and applied for their citizenship in kind of a narrow amount of time there too. An interesting thing about some of my German ancestors or their relatives is that, like, the husband often filed for naturalization, and because he was a citizen, the wife wouldn't file for citizenship because it costs money, and you're trying to make a new life, provide for your family, and so you really didn't need both of you to be citizens. You could both stay if one of you were. But when there were rocky periods in history and trouble was starting between Germany and the United States, then the wives would often file for citizenship too. So I found that to be interesting as well. So that is all I have for you today. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that you learned a little more about the paperwork related to arriving in the United States and becoming a citizen of the United States. And I hope you will take an opportunity to see what paperwork and information you can find on your ancestors' immigration and naturalization. Again, for the naturalization paperwork, those same websites that I mentioned before, so Family Search, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, not Ellis Island for the naturalization paperwork, but the National Archives, I've gotten information there. And again, like I said, they've been very helpful too, so if I've had questions, there's an email you can write to, and they will often help you. I did have a case where I paid the fee to get the naturalization paperwork for one of my ancestors, and they wrote back and said that, I'm sorry, we don't have this information in the National Archives, but I know that it's on FamilySearch.org. Here is the link, and then they refunded my money. So that was pretty cool. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Next week, we'll go over some other information related to family history research. This weekend, the 4th of July is coming up, so for those of you in the United States, happy 4th of July. For our friends in Canada on the 1st, happy Canada Day. Thank you.